Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
I shine a light in Mrs. Lou's eyes, pupils fixed and non-reactive to light. It takes several soft dabs to close her eyelids again. The left one sticks on her gummy eyeball like it's winking at me. I listen on her chest, only the familiar tinkle of miscellaneous internal fluids trickling down with gravity. No cardiac or breath sounds on auscultation. I ask her name, no response to verbal stimuli. I go to elicit a pain response. This is the most uncomfortable part of the post-death verification examination because it seems wrong to jam my fist into the breastbone to see if she wakes up. You got me. I'm not really dead. How hilarious am I? If the family are around, I pinch the patient's nail bed instead on the pretext of feeling for a pulse in the wrist. This is much less confusing for non-medical people than punching their dead grandma in the chest. Mrs. Lou doesn't move despite the pressure on her sternum, and with this she stops looking human and more like a gnarly second-hand clothing store mannequin. Her mouth is twisted open in an O shape, and a web of yellow phlegm stretches from the roof of her mouth to her tongue. Frozen in time with the last agonal breath. No response to pain stimuli.
Dr. Kerry Jewell is a writer and nuclear medicine physician. Her short fiction has appeared in local and international literary journals and anthologies, including Island, The Saturday Paper, May Magazine, and the Bath's Short Story Award anthology. Kerry was shortlisted for the Richel Prize for Emerging Writers for A Little Unwell, then titled Medis. Today I'm talking to Kerry about that book, A Little Unwell. Kerry, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kerry, on reading this book, I feel almost capable of executing a range of medical procedures, including inserting a cannula and drawing blood, administering the correct dose of temazepam or connecting up an insulin infusion, and then following up with the paperwork, all while dealing with surly hospital administrators. In writing A Little Unwell, did you always intend to give the reader the full hospital medical training experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I see this as the next step in evolution on from Dr. Google. So read this book, go out and start working. We have staff shortages in the hospitals. So, this might be the quick way of getting people through and out on the floor. In all seriousness, yes, I did want it to be that visceral. A lot of the tasks that get described in the book might seem a little bit routine or even boring, maybe. It's not, heart surgery that I'm describing, but I think that gives the book an authenticity because this is the bread and butter medicine that our junior doctors and our nursing staff are practicing every day.
Our narrator, Amy, is a doctor, or more accurately, a lowly second-year medical resident without a guaranteed training position for next year. Amy has a certain view of the world. Is she cynical or just realistic?
Well, I think that's something that the reader can decide for themselves. I've written Amy in a very particular way so that her insights, particularly over the course of the book, probably change a little bit depending on what setting she's in or what has happened to her that day. I think it would be fair to say that some of what she's saying is cynical, but the person that you get changes day to day. And that's part of the message that I want to underscore here, that the more we work to make sure that healthcare workers are feeling safe and comfortable, supported, secure in their work environment, the better they can then perform for their patients. So I think it's quite clear in some places in the book that Amy is not necessarily giving her best to her patients of the day, but I want us to understand why. I want the reader to have a think about what could be contributing to the Amy that the patients are getting that day.
As I read the book, I wasn't sure whether Amy has a problem or not. On one hand, she's quite pragmatic in her approach to life and work, but pragmatism can only take one so far. I couldn't help thinking Amy's life trajectory might be slightly or even perhaps way off course. Where's Amy been and where is she headed?
Yeah, look, I deliberately picked second year out working as the focus point for this novel. There are plenty of great medical fiction novels that are set in internship, But I didn't want to have to retread all that ground of starting first day in the hospital and learning what it's all about. So we can jump straight in with her in her second year when she's already been working for a year. She's got her university medical degree behind her. So she's coming in with some experience. But it's that point, well, I felt in my career anyway, where the training wheels come off in the second year and it gets a lot harder, a lot quicker. You've kind of had your starting experience, but then you're expected to just be able to do the job. And it takes many, many years to keep accumulating the skills and knowledge required to do it quite well. You need supervisors around or people who are a little bit further along the pipeline than you are to learn from and to keep improving. So for me, second year is this place where the training wheels are off and it's suddenly a lot harder.
Difficult patients are part of the job. Certainly the evidence is right there in this book. Sometimes the main part of the job is maintaining your own sanity in the face of bad behaviour, blunt refusal, distrust, among other things. To mention just a few of Amy's patients in the opening: Armand, an alcoholic, a patient with a history of alcohol misuse, a very difficult patient who actually used to be a doctor. There's Donald, a hip replacement with bladder problems. Norman, a pacemaker and chronic lung disease, recovering from a fracture. And then a little bit later, Sienna, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes mellitus and refusing her insulin infusion. A lot of things that Amy has to deal with are expressed with a healthy serving of sarcasm or cynicism, but at the same time, there's this underlying sensitivity to their situation and to their, I guess, their prospects too.
Oh no, these are the easy patients actually. So no, look, this is sensitive ground, and I had to be quite careful about how I wrote these characters. They are based on real experiences myself and my colleagues have had in the system, but I made a point of scrambling up details because I would hate for anyone to read this book and feel that I'm giving a one-to-one representation of themselves or their loved one. So there is no patient described in this book that is a one-to-one representation of anyone that myself or my friends have treated in the past. But in writing these patients, I knew that I had to be honest. Part of that comes from knowing that if you're writing medical fiction, the quickest way to turn off healthcare workers who might be reading it is to make it fantasy. We all love watching shows like Grey's Anatomy, Scrubs, that have very wholesome moments that everyone comes together at the end and everything will be okay. The patients are in adoration of the medical teams looking after them. I don't think any patient comes into a hospital with a plan to be difficult. In a lot of the cases, those emotions are precipitated by the system failing around them. They're very natural, logical reactions to having to deal with a public health system that, in some ways is crumbling around them. But I hope what I have articulated is that when we are facing those type of reactions, it slows everything else down, and we then get this opportunity cost of things that we can't do as healthcare workers if we are having to invest time in crisis managing people who are in crisis themselves because of the system. Amy is, as I said, can be cynical, can be sarcastic, but I guess this is the part that makes her suited for the job. She has the ability to throw her mind outside herself and deeply empathize and relate to the people around her and start thinking about their stakeholder views as a way of trying to do it better.
And all the while, she seems very capable, but she also seems very colleague dependent, for better or worse. But friends, colleagues, and enemies all seem to occupy the same space.
Yeah, I think that's fair. A second year resident is quite dependent on the people they work with. They're still learning the job. Medicine works on an apprenticeship model, and I don't think people were meant to know it all in 5 or 6 years. And that's what we're asking from junior doctors. If they've come in having done a 5 or 6 year undergraduate medical degree, or if they've come in after a 4-year postgraduate degree and then are working for a year or two, and that's when you meet them, there's no way that 5 to 6 years of experience can match the older clinician who's been at it for 20 years. You need that exposure, you need that bank of memorable cases to draw from. And I think the way the system is structured at the moment, being so dependent on junior doctors with the least amount of experience for service provision, is again contributing to some of the problems that I describe in the book. If I did have a point to make about how we could do it better, I'd love to highlight the fact that there should be more supervision in public hospitals. I think we should be employing more senior doctors to help be there on the floor, help with teaching. And it's not to take away those clinical experiences from the junior doctors, because you do learn a lot from being on the floor and having to work it out yourself. There is merit in that. But no junior doctor should be sitting there in a difficult situation, too scared to call their senior because they know that they're in an overbooked clinic, or they're running around trying to get other tasks that are equally important done for patients. There needs to be more flexibility in the system so that people are available to help. And I think that's something that has been lost. I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 18 years, if you count my 6 years of university and then the time that I've been working. And it really feels like every last moment of flexibility in our rosters is being squeezed out in the name of efficiency.
Before we talk about Amy and her relationship, let's talk about family life work balance for Amy. Her family consists of Charlie, a rather rebellious sister who sees Amy merely as a stuck-up Melbourne hipster, Grandma, with whom Amy's trying to find time to master the art of the classic sponge before it's too late, and a mother and father who provide a nourishing Sunday lamb roast whenever Amy visits. It all sounds functional enough, but what's the dynamic lurking beneath the surface of this family?
That's a great question. Again, I will leave some of that interpretation to the reader, because the family scenes in particular are where there's quite a bit of nuance. I think some of the hospital-based relationships are a little bit more paint by numbers, shall we say, but there's not more nuance in the family dynamics. So Amy comes from a family where no one else is in healthcare. They can't relate to her experiences directly, but they support her and believe in her and want her to do well. Her grandmother comes from a different time, and we can see the frustration that Amy has, even just convincing her that she is a doctor. I think that's important because home life really plays a significant role in how junior doctors in particular experience their early training and their early work. You can line up 10 junior doctors who've had the same education, have come from the same medical degree, have done the same internship, know the same amount of knowledge. But what's happening at home can really influence how well they do at work, how quickly they get through the rest of their exams and training, even which specialty they decide to go in. If you're coming from a family that is full of doctors who can, now I don't want to, raise the term Nepo doctors maybe, but maybe we should. That's a very different experience from someone who's maybe even from, as Amy is, a country town who had backup plans B through E because she wasn't convinced she would get into medicine, knowing how difficult the selection criteria is. So going from that and then having to navigate all of the imposter syndrome that goes with that to just hit the starting block, that's all really fascinating and important. And I think what helps make these characters so rich.
Now, there's some tension in the relationship between Amy and, well, I don't know what to call him, potential husband, Chris. But on census night in their household, their de facto relationship status seems to be not quite settled. What's going on?
Another great question. What is going on with Chris? I think that is a question that will be repeated over the whole reading of the book. What is going on with Chris? I won't speak too directly on that relationship. I'd love readers to form an opinion for themselves. I know I've had a lot of feedback from early readers about the character of Chris. In fact, of all the characters, I think he is the one I've had the most emotional reactions relayed to me about. I guess what I'm trying to highlight feeds back into this notion before about how home life influences your trajectory through medicine. And I think speaking more broadly, one of the lessons that I hopefully am articulating in this book is just how important partner selection is in life. The character of Chris helps illustrate that quite neatly. As you mentioned, we do find Amy to be a capable young doctor, cynical maybe, but capable. When she's on the rehab ward and she's feeling comfortable at the start of a novel, she can be quite creative and enthusiastic in how she cares for her patients. As her confidence is chipped away at, though, we see different behaviours starting to emerge. I think it would be unfair to lay all of the responsibility for that at Chris's feet, but it is an interesting discussion to have how his influence or how he sees Amy and how he expresses his love for Amy, how she feels loved by him, has a wider ranging impact on her daily experience.
Amy's idea of doctoring arose from the popular TV medical dramas of her teenage years, which seems to have given her a warped sense of the sex lives of healthcare workers and the glamour that might go with it. Is it all working out that way?
It's important to highlight where some of my inspiration for this book came, because I think that will help answer this question nicely. So I'm going to hold up a book called The House of God by Samuel Shen. And it is the quintessential medical fiction novel that everyone recommends when you're starting medical school or heading into being a junior doctor. The recommendation is to read House of God. And I had a very severe reaction to it when I read it in internship. I could not believe that this is what was being recommended as a way to gain insight into the job I was meant to be performing. For one, there is no female intern in this book. The cohort of interns it follows are all male, which probably for the time was accurate. But in a lot of ways, it's described as a bit of a sex comedy. So I think here on the back, The House of God is a wild and raunchily irreverent novel. Yeah, I was blown out because so much of this book is just about sex and gratifying the main character. There's plenty of else going on in this book as well. But for a young female doctor coming in, I struggled with it. I could not relate. So I've written the book that I wish I could have read instead to help me understand the world that I was becoming a part of. That said, I've recently, over the last weekend, started reading The House of God again. It's 12 years since I read it, and I have a slightly different perspective now. I think it is a good historic novel that should be read by medical students and junior doctors. There is a lot of wisdom in there, and there is a lot of telling it like it was at the time that gives historic context to why we are as we are now. So I would still recommend that it be read. Maybe not the first stop, though, on the to be read pile. But coming back, yeah, that's part of the reason I wrote A Little Unwell, because I wanted a text to exist that more accurately reflected the issues that I was coming up against in 21st century Australian healthcare.
A Little Unwell is definitely funny, full of black humour. Is that just part of the profession?
Absolutely. No, actually, on the ward, we're very serious. We never joke. No, I think any healthcare worker would tell you the same thing, that it's so essential to help process the extreme spectrums of life that we see in a hospital. And not just in a hospital, there's plenty of community-based medicine that's happening as well. I had a very sobering moment when I was getting the judging notes from the Richell Prize, which is how A Little Unwell has found some life with Hachette. In 2020, I was shortlisted for that prize, and they were reading out some of the judges' comments, and one of the comments was praising the dark humour. And it was during COVID, and I was sitting at home watching the broadcast, and I just sort of thought to myself, wow, I thought that was just humour. And it really made me reflect on how some elements of what I've written might be perceived outside of the medical sphere. And to be fair, like at times, Amy can be quite judgmental, and some of what she's describing might seem quite callous, but there's a reason why. And it's not just for Amy to be personally processing what's going around her. It's also about finding truth. And that's one of the hard parts about being a doctor, that part of the job is telling people things that they don't want to hear, or exploring the facets of cases that are difficult to confront. Possibly that's some of where the callousness comes from. It's not because Amy wants to be harsh or unsupportive necessarily to her patients, but it's about trying to find that truth.
There's a statement that I came across: death is not the worst thing that can happen to a person in hospital. On one hand, I laughed, but I had to think about that.
Amazing that you've picked out that line, because I originally wanted that as the tag for the cover or for some of the, but I was convinced that that might be a bit too grim to lead with. It's so true though. It really is. It's a difficult conversation to have, death versus the alternative. So without going into too much gory detail, yes, I think that is one of the big anchoring lines in the novel. And the longer you think about it, the more thoughts you will have.
Kerry Jewell, it's been a great pleasure to have your insights into the medical profession, and thanks so much for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I've been talking to Kerry Jewell about her new book, A Little Unwell. It's published by Hachette, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to Good Reading print and online magazine at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.